Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Sonia, and I'm so happy to be your host for this Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants aims to inspire the next generation by bringing science, exploration, adventure, and conservation into classrooms through virtual live events just like this one. Today, we are so lucky to be joined by Chrissy in the Turtle Hospital in the Florida Keys. She's going to talk to us today about what they've been doing and show us some of the turtles that they are currently helping and rehabilitating and what we can do to get involved. So I am going to, without further ado, I'm going to pull up Chrissy. Hi, Chrissy.
Good morning. Welcome to the Turtle Hospital. Again, my name's Chrissy, and I'll be your educator this morning. Before me here, we have a green sea turtle. Now, green sea turtles get to be about 500 pounds, 3.5, 4 feet long. But they're not really green looking on the outside, are they? Due to their diet of seagrass and algae, it gives them a very green fatty tissue on the inside. So they're actually known for their green meat instead. Sailors that used to travel in the ocean would round up these green sea turtles and throw them on board their ships on their backs. So when a sea turtle is upside down, it cannot right itself. It's called a stay put position, and they can stay out of the water for a long period of time. That used to provide those sailors that fresh meat. And here in the Keys, we even had what was called a turtle cannery, where they used to can the turtle meat for stews and soups. In 1973, they passed an Endangered Species Act, and you can no longer harvest them for their meat, shell, eggs, or leather. Now, other countries will eat their eggs, just like we eat chicken eggs here in the States. So this is a 176-pound turtle named Charlie. Charlie came in with something called fibropapilloma tumors. Now, what it is the poor water quality breaks down their immune system. And the turtles are so little, they're kind of like toddlers. They don't have that immune system built up yet to fight off this herpes-like virus. And so it's like feeding a baby poison, and they break out into these tumors. Charlie had the second largest tumor we ever saw. It was a 6-pound tumor on his back flipper that was also entangled in trap line. And I'll kind of show you it right here really quick so you can kind of see that tumor that was huge there. So Charlie's had one surgery to remove some of the tumors, has more surgeries to go. And all those little tumors underneath him are more tumors he has to have surgery to remove as well. But when they start eating toxic grass beds and swimming in toxic water, and year round the water temperature is so much warmer down here, they just break out to the virus. Now, Charlie was also attacked by a shark. You say, well, how do you know that? That turtle has 4 flippers, a head, a tail, and no chunk marks out of its shell. If you can see on the back of his shell there, he has what we call rake lines. Those are the scratch marks due to the shark's teeth. Sea turtles can do burst speeds of 35 miles an hour. They will twist, turn, and maneuver their body using their shell like a shield up to the shark's mouth. Now, the turtle shell is made of keratin, which is the same stuff your fingernail is. And the top part of their shell is called the carapace. The underneath side is called the plastron. And each one of those individual sections are called scutes. And so right now she's doing wound care where he had that tumor removed. And you'll never believe what we use for wound care. It's something that bees make that you eat. We use honey like you would use an antibiotic or antiseptic. Honey is an all-natural antiseptic, and you can use it on yourself. And we use a lot of meta honey around here as well. So she's packing that wound with some meta honey right now. And hopefully Charlie will have some more surgeries, and then Charlie will get to go back to the wild in maybe about a year's time. Pretty big turtle, though. Over here, I have a loggerhead turtle. They get to be about 450 pounds, 3.5 feet long. And Chopper here is like I said, loggerhead. He only weighed 125 pounds, but he came in with the largest tumor we have ever seen. It was a 14-pound tumor. It was the size of a basketball on his front flipper. Now, at first we did remove the tumor. We tried to save the flipper. We did physical therapy, we did laser therapy, we did something called leech therapy. Those are freshwater leeches we put on a flipper to help circulate this blood. But unfortunately, after about a week, we were not able to save that flipper. So we had to amputate it. Now, when a turtle has a flipper amputated, everybody wonders, does a turtle swim in circles? That only happens if they're in a round tank. They use their front flippers to propel forward, then they use their back flippers to steer with. So they do learn to compensate over time. When it's an adult female and they need to nest on a beach somewhere, they can still do that. They actually go through the whole motions of having an invisible flipper, but they get up there and they get it done. But usually in 2 to 3 months with an amputation, they go back to the wild. But Charlie also has to have more surgeries to remove the tumors. But it's not usually the loggerheads we see with the tumors. It's 99.9% of the time, I say they're mostly greens that come to our hospital that have the tumors. You say, well, how does a loggerhead get the tumors then? I like to call it the blood bugs. You know how ticks and lice in the wild could spread diseases? Well, there are leeches and other blood-sucking critters in the ocean that will, spread diseases along as well. So we'll get Charlie up going and feeling better, and hopefully in less than a year, we'll get him back out to the wild. Over here is Chuck. Now, Chuck actually was entangled in monofilament line. And I'll show you when he came in, he had the floor flippers. And you can kind of see where he had all 4 flippers there. He also got a chunk out of his shell. But we had to amputate that flipper. The monofilament line, which was so thick, cut straight down to the bone. And unfortunately, there was no saving that flipper. But hopefully in another month or so, Chuck will go back out to the wild. But loggerheads like to eat hard shell invertebrates. They like lobsters, crabs, horseshoe crabs, and conch shells. They have a very, very powerful jaw. Their bite force is almost the same as a great white shark. And so they have a very powerful jaw there. Believe it or not, though, their brain is very, very tiny. Their brain is only the size of your thumb. And so they have a very little brain, but a very big, powerful jaw. And we're going to move over here to Kiki. This is a green turtle who's currently in quarantine, which we know what quarantine is now because of the coronavirus. But she doesn't have corona. She has something called Cariospora. She's a green turtle, and Cariospora is an intestinal parasite. Cats and dogs get parasites, and turtles will get parasites too. They have to be 3 feces or poop sample free of parasites before they can join other turtles or return back to the ocean. That could take 8 to 10 weeks or longer because turtles have very, very slow metabolisms. She had a big, huge tumor as well on the front of her flipper, and it was the size of a grapefruit. She's had a couple surgeries so far, a couple more to go. And she is doing pretty good. And hopefully within a year, we'll also get her back to the wild. She is a female turtle. Now, most of the time, by looking at the turtles, you can't tell unless they're over the age of around 25. Boys will have really thick, fat tails that go beyond their shell or carapace, and females have these itty-bitty little tails. But we do know what most of these green juveniles are. When they come to us with the tumors on them, we have to do an endoscope. We have to go inside of them and make sure there are no internal tumors. Or in there, we usually find out what their gender is as well. But we will not do an invasive scope just to find out if a turtle is a boy or a girl. So Kiki's got a few more to go, but she's got a gorgeous shell on her. And here, we'll go back over to Charlie for a second, because you can see really quick those shark rake lines on his shell there, where the shark got to him. And now the turtles, they have a lot of feeling in their shell as well. And what it is, it's like your fingernail, again, so they have some good feeling. And they can scratch your shells, because in between those scoots, you can get worms, lice, leeches, and all kinds of things. It'd be like you and I getting something shoved underneath your fingernail, and that would drive you crazy. And it drives them crazy too. So often scratch your shells on corals and rocks. But we don't have corals and rocks in here. So you'll see these different PVC things in some of the tanks. And they just use it to scratch your shells on when they get an itch. We're going to move on to see some more turtles, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about the hospital really quick here too. So we're on an old motel. They've converted the motel into a hospital. And these wonderful heroes, which are rehab staff who care for the turtles, actually live here. They live in the old motel rooms, and they're here to meet the turtles' needs 24/7. The other nice thing is we're right on the water, so we do not have to make salt water. We actually pump it in, and it goes into a filtration system, and then it goes circulating through the tanks. So it makes it very convenient that we do not have to make salt water here. And these tanks, these small tanks, are kind of like their own personal hospital bed. So they're going through different stages of care here at the hospital as well. The first tank you're going to come to, with their scratching post in there, is what I call my Beast of Beauty story. This is Birdie, and she was loaded in tumors. Wait till I show you her picture. Her eyes, her flippers, she was a mess. She is now tumor free, and hopefully she'll remain that way. But she couldn't see when she came in with the tumors on her eyes, and that makes like a very sad or depressed turtle. They don't want to swim, they can't see where they're going. They don't want to eat. They have a very good sense of smell. They just don't feel like eating. So just by removing the tumors from their eyes, it will often perk up their personality. They'll start swimming and eating the very next day. Now, our turtles actually get to go see a veterinarian ophthalmologist, fancy word for the eye doctor. And the eye doctor will remove the tumors from their eyes and put them on something called cancer eye drops. So twice a day, they'll get taken out of the tank for eye drops. And twice a month, we'll pile up the 7 turtles in the ambulance. And they all get to go on a field trip to Miami to see Dr. K, our eye doctor. Looking quite beautiful she is, though. Over here is another little green turtle who had some tumors removed, Conlechi. Conlechi is actually a pretty lucky turtle. Didn't have as many tumors and had what we call really good blood chemistry and a good body weight. It wasn't really that skinny. So we were able to start surgeries right away. And that'll kind of reduce the recovery time of the turtle. And so hopefully in a few more months, we'll get Conlechi here back to the wild. Now, the funny thing about their names, too, is the people who rescued them are the ones who name them. We don't actually name the turtles most of the time. The rescuers do. We've had some crazy ones over the years. We've had Optimus Prime and Miley Cyrus and Cardi T and Dr. Fauci and a bunch of crazy names, Chuck Norris. And so down here is a turtle named Little Fat Brianna. She's a loggerhead turtle. Oh, she's got to come up. So we'll go on to another loggerhead here. I got some little ones, though. Open this up here. This is Ethel. And next door we have Lucy. These two are about a year old. And they are actually what we call the Head Start program. The FWC in the state gives us permission to keep 2 turtles because 1 in 1,000 of these guys will make it to adulthood, which is somewhere between the age of around 25. Because everything wants to eat them. They are literally dinner on the dinner plate. Birds, crabs, bayfish, sharks, raccoons, you name it, everything wants to eat them. So by keeping these 2 little guys here until they're 2 years old, they will have what's called a healthy immune system. And at the size of 2 feet, the only predator they're really going to have to worry about are sharks. And in the meantime, they usually get to go on field trips. So they'll go to schools and summer camps, outreach program, library, festivals. And usually one of them gets to go to church every year. They go to the blessing of the pets at the Catholic Church. But these guys, what gets them into trouble the biggest is they first 2 years of life, they live at the Sargasso seaweed patches. Those are big floating patches of grasses and stuff out there. And in those patches are a bunch of other little organisms like sea lice, and there's like jellyfish and bivalves. Well, everything floating in the ocean has to stop when it hits something. So all this trash, it hits the Sargasso and breaks down into smaller pieces of trash. And these little guys don't know the difference between plastic not being a jellyfish or the trash that's in there. And so they will eat anything. They're like toddlers again. If they can fit it in their mouth, they will try it. They eat a bunch of trash and they don't make it, unfortunately. But they'll be here for 2 years, and they're about a year old now. Now, when they first come in, the hatchlings are about the size, we call them nuggets, because they're about the size of a chicken McNugget. And so they still got a year to go. They're only about a year old now. But they were part of research. And so what it is the temperature inside your nest will determine whether you have girls or boys, hatchlings. A warmer nest, you'll have more girls. A cooler nest, you'll have more boys. And so the researchers were doing studies on the nests here on the east side of the state of Florida and other places to find out what our nests here in Florida are actually producing. And the researchers believe in the last 2 years, we really have not produced one boy turtle. Because of the warmer climate change, they have all been female, which definitely will be a problem later on in life. So we do know Ethel and Lucy are both girls. Now, normally it takes roughly 50 to 60 days down here for a nest to hatch. Usually 3 days after that nest hatches, nesting surveyors and park rangers will go out. They will excavate the nest and count the eggs. Sometimes you find little babies in the nest that didn't make it out. They get stuck under roots or their brothers and sisters just pile on top of them, and they don't always make it out of the nest. And then we'll also have bad storms. Now, they don't always have to be tropical storms or hurricane. We'll have gale force winds. And those winds will push these little guys back in with the seagrass and it docks, marinas, and beaches. And they're just tired out and need a chauffeur or a taxi to give them a ride back out there. And then birds will drop them because you never know where a bird's going to drop a hatchling sometimes. Craziest places. And sometimes the turtles come in with all these little chunks out of them. And what it is they're being attacked by predators. So think about it. Something deep and triangular could be like a bird's beak. Rounded could be like a fish's mouth. As long as it doesn't hit any vital organs, they're just left with a bunch of scars and they survive. Now, one of the ways these little guys actually protect themselves out in the ocean a little bit, they are very light, like white color underneath right now. And so for predators swimming up underneath them, looking up, they kind of blend in with the sky and the clouds. These turtles at this stage, which is between post-hatchling and juvenile, they have what's called a keel on their back. It is a very spiky ridge. It gives them that dinosaur look to their shell, and they will outgrow it over time. But makes them look tougher to a predator, pretty much. And also on their flippers, they have nails. These turtles have front and back flipper nails. And they use these nails for a couple different reasons. They kind of use them to dig with. Sea turtles, they cannot pull their heads or flippers inside their shell like other aquatic turtles can. So sometimes they'll kind of move the sand around and put their heads under corals or rocks, and that protects them from sharks as they rest at the bottom. They also use them to dig with, like when they're digging that nest up in the sand and the dunes, it'll help rip up the roots to build the egg chamber. And then they use them like a toothpick. So if something gets stuck in that beak and they can't get it out, they will run that flipper along with that nail, pluck it on out just like a big old toothpick. And let me tell you, them nails are sharp. They're like getting hit with a push pin sometimes. And we feed these guys little bits of squid, and they'll sometimes get other food. Now, we're not worried about them being here because when they go back to the wild, they're already going to know everything they need to know to survive in the wild. For such a tiny little brain, they know how to survive. Mama never teaches them anything. Mama deposits eggs in the sand and then disappears, and she might never see them again. But they're born with the natural instincts that they need to go back to survive in the wild. We keep it closed because a lot of times if a bird comes in, they can get, when they're small, attacked by a bird. And this way, if something doesn't fall in their tank, they won't try to eat it because I said they'll try to put everything in their mouths. They're so awful about that. Over here is our main pool. And this was the original swimming pool built with the motel in the 50s. Didn't have a lot of freshwater pools because we're on an island and it was pretty expensive. And so when the founder, Richie Moretti, purchased the property in the 80s, he did some upgrades and put in a chlorine pool for his guests. And he turned this into what he called an environmental learning center. He'd stock it with different kinds of tropical fish you find here in the Keys. So his guests stay in the hotel could come and snorkel with the fish and leave it to the kids in a very popular show at that time. The kids would ask Mr. Moretti, well, hey, dude, where's all the turtles? And so that's when the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were born. So he thought it would be really cool to have some turtles here, but he found out you can't because they're an endangered species. But he also found out there's a great need to help sick and injured turtles in the Keys. So by obtaining a permit through our Florida Fish and Wildlife and having a local vet nearby, Dr. Vet, he was able to turn this into a rehabilitation center and from there into a full-blown hospital. Now the fish he had put in here died off. There are fish in here now. It is connected to the ocean, so it's a tide pool, so the water rises and falls with the tide. And the fish come in when they're nice and little, and they get really big, have a bunch of baby fish, and then we got to fish the fish out and throw them back in the ocean. So currently in this pool are all turtles that cannot go back to the wild due to their injuries. Kent here was hit by a propeller prop, and a lot of times their spine is connected to their shell, and they get hit and they become paralyzed. So they can't move their back flipper. She can, though. And air gets trapped inside their shell or their intestines, or they have lung issues, and they can't dive down. They're what we call bubble butts, and it's also called the positive buoyancy disorder. We actually have the original bubble butt here. We saw the first case in 1989, and they named that turtle bubble butt. But they can't get under the water, so they would not survive back in the wild. They wouldn't be able to get down to get the algae and the crabs and the food that they need. So they're here for life, or they'll go to another zoo aquarium. Kent here is a girl. I like to call her my drama queen. If you notice, she squirts water out her nose. They actually all do that. She just does it very dramatically. And they don't need to drink that salt water, or they become very dehydrated. So they expel the excess water out their noses. The round things on the back of her are actually what we call lead weights. It's a heavy metal, and there is no mathematical equation on how much lead weight to put on a bubble butt. It is strictly trial and error. We will attach Velcro strips to their shell and put lead weights on Velcro. Once we find out where and how much lead weight to put on their bubble butt, we'll apply it with marine epoxy. But this way, the lead's not touching their shell and it's not exposed in the water for the longer period of time. Now, Chance here, that white patch on the side of him, he just lost one of his lead weights. But we have to give his shell time to heal and peel, just like your fingernail would. And in order to get, before we put more weights back on his shell again. He has that bubble butt, so you can see how his butt is hanging up in the air. And he can't get down without the weights on. The weights make him more comfortable and more stable in the water sometimes. But these are all currently bubble butts right here, except for Montel. This one right here, he is our poster child for if anything bad can happen to a poor turtle, it has happened to poor Montel. Now, he only has half of a front flipper. Lost a flipper due to a shark attack. Lost the other flipper due to fishing line. Got a notch out of the side where he was hit by a boat. And he's missing an eye due to the tumors. So with all that drama in his life, we really hope the rest of his life is drama-free here. But he's a pretty good-sized turtle. But he survives. Now, green turtles are pretty much passive one another. They're not really sociable animals, but you might find a couple of them by grass beds. But they pretty much get along most of the time, except for Toby here. We had to put her in timeout when she first came in because she did not play well with the other turtles. She would bite them, and then she finally learned to play nice with the other turtles, and she's down here in the pool with the rest of them again. And we have to give these turtles baths regularly because we don't actually have the fish in here that would keep the turtles clean. Because when they're sick and injured, when you find a sick and injured one, a lot of times they'll have a whole habitat on their shell. They'll have like lice, leeches, barnacles, snails, all kinds of algae growing on their shell. And that's not a healthy turtle. They're floating at the surface, so photosynthesis sets in. And all this stuff, they're moving so slow because they have to breathe for air at the surface, you know. And all that stuff will grow on their shell. And then they get very sick and weighed down by it. Now, this one here is Hanson Bowie. We're actually very excited to have her with us. She was rescued 3 years ago this June. When she came in, she had a bit of jewelry on her flipper. It's called a flipper tag. So when we send our turtles back out to the wild, if they're ever found again, we can run that tag and find out where they were. And flipper tags are found throughout the world as well. And we found out when we ran that tag and got the information back, she was here. She was here in 1994 to 1997. She was under a fibropapilloma tumor study and released in November of 97, weighing 35 pounds. Well, she don't look like she weighs 35 pounds anymore, does she? In February, she actually tipped the scale at 311 pounds. But the reason we're kind of excited to have her with us, in the 34-year history of this hospital, we've only had 3 turtles ever return for a second visit here. The other 2 are loggerheads, and she is the first green. So after we remove the tumors, keep them here roughly a full year to build up that immune system, and send them back out to the wild, we never really knew if they regrew the tumors again or not till now. But as an adult right now, she doesn't have the tumors. They built up that immune system. But unfortunately, she was hit by something, so she does have bubble butt syndrome. And here comes the original bubble butt. I want to point him out to you. He has a very deformed shell. And that a lot of times happens due to the bubble butt. And it'd be hard to tell the bubble butt turtle's age when their shell is so deformed, and sometimes their growth is stunted. And the way to tell a turtle's age usually goes by the size of their shell and how much they weigh. They get put in a category of a hatchling, post-hatchling, juvenile, subadult, or adult turtle. And the last turtle I'm going to talk about, and then we'll take some questions really quick, is my one adult female Kemp's ridley. This is the most critically endangered of all the species. They get to be about 100 pounds, 2 feet long. They like to eat crustaceans, and they're also known as the ghost turtle because of their coloring. They range from a yellowish to a grayish in color. and that helps them hide in the sandy bottoms of the Gulf of Mexico. So you might be able to see her. She's right there. And she plays that ghost act very well because Kemp's Ridleys can stay up to underwater for about 5 hours. So she actually only comes up on her time, not ours, unfortunately. She did lose her front left flipper due to entanglement. We had to amputate it, and she is missing. She also has bubble butt syndrome, so she cannot be returned back to the wild, unfortunately. But they are the most critically endangered of all the species. These turtles that can't go back to the wild, they do serve as another purpose. There are blood donors, but it has to be species to species because they don't actually have AB blood types like we do. The other two species that you find in Florida waters that we don't have are hawksbills and leatherbacks. And we don't find a lot of leatherbacks down here. They like deep water. And we just currently don't have any hawksbill turtles at the moment. All right, we want to start taking some questions from you guys now.
Chrissy, thank you so much. I really enjoyed seeing all the turtles and hearing about what you guys are doing. We definitely have some questions from our classes joining us live, and I'll mix in a few of the questions from our YouTube classes also joining us. So first we're going to go to Miss Beckett's second grade class. Hello.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. Let me turn on one of my students so they can ask a question. Boys and girls, raise your hand if you have a question. All right, this is Audrey. Audrey, turn on your mic.
How do turtles swim?
How do the turtles swim? Well, they use their front flippers to propel forward, and they kind of use their back flippers to steer with. And so they use them in a sequence. You could see how Bubble Butt really can't use his back flippers, but he makes them front flippers go quite well to propel him through the water smoothly.
Awesome. All right, we're going to check in with Mrs. Little's grade 1-2 class here.
Hello. I have Allison and William and Everett who would like to know, how many turtles do you have in your hospital, or how many can you have in total?
Well, currently we have 29 turtles. We don't actually have a mass capacity. We have lots of tanks. We have research tanks. We have portable tanks for the turtles to go into. The problem we actually have are loggerhead turtles. That species of sea turtle, they tend to be more aggressive and territorial. So a lot of times you can't put two loggerheads together. Like you could put one loggerhead. I have a loggerhead in here right now named Rebel with a bunch of these greens. You just can't put two of them together. But right now we have a very low amount of turtles here. We only have 29. We usually range between 50 and 60, usually on average.
Awesome. I have a class from, I have a question from one of our YouTube classes, and they asked, this is Mrs. Morningstar's class, they asked, how many eggs do turtles usually lay?
Usually on average, anywhere from 80 to 120 in one clutch of nest. But mama turtle doesn't lay one nest. They will lay 4 to 7 nests a year, and then they'll take 1 to 3 years off, depending on the species, and then go back to that same beach they were born from. It's called their natal beach. So even though these turtles return to the ocean, when these turtles grow up and become mamas, they will go back to the same beach they were born from to have their children there.
Awesome. We have Miss Samra's class joining us virtually, so I'm going to pull them up to ask a question.
Hi, so my class is bursting with tons of different questions. I am going to ask just a couple. So one, they predominantly want to know, how do they really fight off their predators?
Miss Samra, your mic's muted.
Oh.
How do they fight off predators?
Yeah, how do they fight off their predators, and what their favorite foods are, the turtles, what they like eating.
So one of the things is they use their shell like a shield up to the shark's mouth. So when a shark's chasing them, and they can do bird speeds of 35 miles an hour, they will twist and turn and maneuver their bodies and actually use that shell and put it up to the shark's mouth so they can't get a bite of it. And they also hide their heads under rocks or corals because their shell is kind of hard, you know what I mean? And so that kind of protects their heads, and they'll tuck their flippers underneath them. They do have those nails, and like they'll also use their powerful mouths and jaws to try to bite sharks if they're trying to be attacked. And sometimes the shark won't always eat the whole turtle. It's kind of like they'll take a snack, a flipper here, a flipper there, sometimes save the turtle for another day.
And I think they also wanted to know what turtles like to eat.
Green turtles, well, we don't normally go out and mow the grass beds of the ocean or pull up algae from them. We feed them romaine lettuce, peppers, squid, cucumbers, and they also get an extra supplement called turtle chow, which is little grass-based pellets we feed them. And the loggerheads tend to like their lobsters and crabs and conch shells. Now, out in the wild, if they see a fish dead or dying, they will be opportunic feeders, but they don't always go out of their way to catch fish. So sometimes we will feed them fish when we're trying to, up their blood chemistry and put some weight on a turtle. They'll eat it for us. But they can be picky eaters sometimes too.
Awesome. We have another question from our YouTube viewers, and they're asking, how old can turtles get?
They can live, some of the species like loggerheads and greens will live anywhere from 80 to 100 years, they figure. The Kemp's ridleys is the smallest of all the species, matured about age 15, and they figured they live to be about 45 years old. So kind of different between those different species of sea turtles.
Awesome. That's pretty old. We have Mr. Kurt's class joining us, so I'm going to pull them up for a question.
We have 2 questions, so I'm going to let the kids ask.
Okay. How do you guys? I'm really short. How do you guys get the turtles out of the ocean? You said they were like 100 pounds or 200 pounds.
Oh yeah. Well, it takes a lot of us. It takes anywhere from 4 or 5 of us sometimes to move the turtles. It just depends. We do have an elevator here. And a lot of times we're not really the ones who rescue the turtles. A lot of people that are out in the water, like the boaters and the fishermen and, charter boat captains out there, they see turtles out there all the time. So when they see a sick or injured one, they'll call us and we'll go pick up the turtle. We'll meet them at some dock or marina. But we do lift them up around here. And a lot of times it's all muscle power. Like we don't have an elevator lift up here. So it takes 3 or 4 of them at a time to move the turtles. And we know which ones are the biters too. So we're very cautious sometimes because this one here, Chomper, he got his name because he was trying to bite the boat and motor. And so we're very cautious. We know who their biters are and who they aren't. When they come in, they're so lethargic and weak a lot of times. They don't put up much of a fight. But once they're feeling good, watch out. You can get turtle slapped pretty bad. And those nails will scratch and cut you open. And like I said, they do bite as well.
Yeah, one more quick question.
What is your most recent turtle that you've rescued?
This one, Charlie. And the funny thing about this turtle is we had just did our newsletter saying about some of the crazy names we had come to the turtle hospital. Me and one of the other coworkers were working on it. And the most popular name we've had come to the hospital in the last couple of years was Charlie. We had 7 of them spelled with an I-E, Charlie with an I-E. And then this one came in right after we got done with that letter to make it number 8. Then we had about 3 Charlies with an L-Y.
All right. We have a question from Ms. Counter's grade 6 class.
Okay, so I have a question. Do you have smaller turtle species like the Mississippi map turtle, or is it just bigger like sea turtles?
We just have sea turtles because one, we're down here in the Florida Keys, so we are surrounded by saltwater. There is not a whole lot of fresh water down here for freshwater turtles to survive in. So we have mostly sea turtles here at the hospital. Every now and then somebody will drop a turtle or tortoise off that they found, that we'll try to take to the veterinarian hospital and hopefully or rehabilitation center or sanctuary that they can help the turtles. But we pretty much just take care of sea turtles here.
And we have one more class joining us live, and then I'll take a few YouTube questions. But we have Madame Laban's class here. You guys have a question to ask Chrissy? We can see you guys. Ooh. All right, I'm going to ask one of our YouTube questions, and then we're going to come back for our last class's question. But questions from YouTube are coming in, and they're asking, what's the worst type of plastic that's found in the grasses that harm the turtles, and what can we do to kind of reduce that pollution?
Well, plastic, it breaks down into smaller parts. The sun, the salt, it just breaks down that plastic. So any kind of plastic is really bad. I mean, think about it. The loggerheads and stuff like to eat all that white stuff, and like, crabs and stuff. So like styrofoam and other white hard pieces of plastic, it has a crunch when they bite it. There's a lot of trash in that ocean. They find plastic silverware, all kinds of stuff, water bottles, that plastic bags, they look like jellyfish in the water. All species of sea turtle eat jellyfish. Jellyfish are 90% most time water, and they can get some fresh water from jellyfish. So it's really sad to see these turtles eat so much trash out there because they think it's their food.
All right, our last class, I think they're having an issue with their mic, but they sent me their question, and they're asking, how many turtles have you treated in total? How many turtles, since you guys started, have you treated?
It's been since 1986 that the hospital started taking in turtles, and since then, they didn't have a lot of good records back then, so I'm not quite sure how much they've had with the turtles. How many turtles they've come through. But we have released over 2,000 back to the wild.
That's amazing. That's a lot. That's a lot of turtles.
Including babies, yep. And like I said, this hospital's been in operation since 1986. So throughout the years, there's always been new improvements, new ideas of how to help the turtles, new ways to fix the turtles and make them better, new medicines, new, therapies like laser therapy and stuff, leeches. Throughout the years, they've learned to do new things and help the turtles. Science is a wonderful way to help all kinds of animals and people too.
And other than sharks, people are wondering, what are the other main predators of turtles?
Well, leatherbacks can go to the cold water temperatures, so they would possibly have to worry about orca whales. But once they're a certain size, it's just pretty much sharks. I mean, when they're little, like I said, everything wants to eat them. Crabs, lobster, everything wants to eat them. Crabs, birds, fish. See, it's muscle power.
All right. And we will take a final question from YouTube, and then one of our classes has a couple more questions. And then, unfortunately, we'll have to wrap up, even though I love seeing all these turtles. So YouTube is asking, how old is the oldest turtle that you guys currently have in the hospital?
Well, Bubble Butt's been here since 1989. But again, it'd be hard to tell his age because the way we kind of tell a turtle's age, a lot of times it goes by the size of their shell and how much they weigh. They get put in a category of whether they're hatchling, post-hatchling, juvenile, subadult, or adult turtle. We know he's an adult turtle because he's been here that long, but it'd be hard to tell that because of his shell is so deformed.
That's true. Okay, we have a couple more classes, a couple more questions from our live classes. So I'm going to pull them up, starting with Miss Counter's class.
Okay, my question is, what is the longest time that a turtle has stayed at the hospital?
What's the longest time a turtle has to stay at the hospital? We have some that are permanent residents that can't go back to the wild. But if you're talking about a patient that's going to go back to the wild, a lot of times we tend to keep the green turtles roughly a full year here because it goes by the date of their last surgery to become tumor-free. We want to make sure they have a really healthy immune system with no regrowth of tumors. Because sometimes the turtles will regrow the tumors, and we have to do more surgeries to remove the tumors. And then they have to have more surgeries to remove the tumors. As long as the tumors aren't on the inside, a lot of times we can help the turtles. But if the tumors are on the inside, most of the time they have to be euthanized or put to sleep.
And also, what is the most endangered turtle?
The Kemp's ridley. The one we have, the one.
What's the largest turtle in size you've ever picked up?
We had Chris Farley, that was 375 pounds. And right after that, we had Little Money, who was 365 pounds.
So
Charlie was 375 pounds. So
we have a lot of questions coming in, but we only have time to visit 2 more classes, and then we'll have to wrap up. But let's go to Miss Little's grade 1-2 class.
Hi there. Aiden in our class is wondering if you could tell us a little bit about turtles' eyes, because they're very interesting looking.
their eyes are interesting looking. If you look at these guys, they have little spikes around their eyes. And it's kind of cool. Just helps protect their eyes. And what it is too is like they eat jellyfish, but they're kind of immune to their sting. But the turtles do tend to close their eyes when they eat that jellyfish because I think it could sting their eyes. Now turtles definitely see better in the water than they do out of the water. But they have very unique looking eye. And that turtle can see you right now.
That's amazing. They do have really unique looking eyes. All right, we're going to take a final question from our live class. I think they got their mic working now, so let's check in with them.
How heavy do turtles usually weigh?
I couldn't hear that question.
Can you repeat that for us?
Say it again. How heavy do turtles usually weigh?
How much do the turtles usually weigh? Anywhere between a couple ounces to a couple hundred pounds. Like I said, green turtles can get to be about 500 pounds.
Well, Chrissy, thank you so much for all the information you shared with us today and showing us the patients at the Turtle Hospital. I really enjoyed it. Turtles are one of my favorite creatures, so I always look forward to
They are totally awesome.
They're amazing. I'm sure all of our classes really enjoyed it. We got more questions than we could possibly answer today. So where can students go if they want more information about what you guys do?
You can follow us on, well, we do live feeds on Facebook quite often. We do have a web page that you can follow the turtles' progress on as well. So there's just a couple places there. And the best way you can help the turtles is to reduce, reuse, and recycle.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to pull up our classes to wave bye and thank you. We had a great time talking to you today.
Thank you for visiting the Turtle Hospital.